And it must be recorded that the founding fathers were not a team because they worked together. They were a team because they reinforced each other and had deep respect and trust for one another. They taught us that nation building is like building a house. This endeavor is a product of teamwork and not individualism. They built a firm foundation for a prosperous Kenya. Others amongst them built the walls and others roofed the house. Everyone had a role to play, and no role was greater or lesser than the other. The same is true today as it was then. We are building a house called Kenya, and there is no place for one-manism in this project. It is the collective work of every able-bodied Kenyan. And yes, we will disagree at times, but in our disagreements, we must always remain respectful. In fact, respectful disagreements are what lead to reconciliation. More so, because when we disagree, it is a sign that we are making progress. The making of a nation and the building of a house are a living process. They cannot be static and must be dynamic. Errors are made sometimes, and renovations must correct them after the house is completed. Indeed, in the recent past, in December of 1991, it was established that the one-party system was a design error in our nationhood, and the advancement of the Republic had outlived its usefulness, and we made renovations and changed the system. In 2007, we ran into another defect in our nation-building project, and we discovered that the politics of exclusion, in which the winner takes all, was not good for our country, and we were bold enough to change our constitution and expand the executive in order to accommodate the excluded. And indeed, when the former Prime Minister, Right Honorable Raila Odinga, and I shook hands on March 8th of 2018, it was because we saw a crack on the wall of our nation. We had run 2 elections that costed the country in excess of 1 trillion shillings. These losses made us see that we were staring at a nation divided right in the middle. But because we had disagreed respectfully, we knew that this was a mark of progress, and though it was difficult, the necessity, the reason, and recognition that we as Kenyans need each other, nation before self, as our forefathers had taught us, to come together, reinforced our resolve. Therefore, again, I will continue to say that we need to come together and mend the crack on the wall of our nation, and this, I believe, is what necessitated the First Amendment to our Constitution. And although it encountered some legal obstacles, I say again today that BBI is just a dream deferred. One day, someday, it will happen. Because just as the country cannot survive ethnic majoritarianism and exclusion, just in the same breath, it cannot survive unfair and skewed representation. This is a design defect, and we must fix it. Fellow Kenyans, the Garden of the People, therefore, is not just a place of remembrance. It was gifted to us as a place where generations shall tell stories of where we have come from, where we are, and indeed where we are going. It is an arena of truth, narrated before God, verified by history, and reinforced by the acts of our founding fathers and each and every one of us as we move through life. And it is a convergence point between our past, our present. It must also, therefore, be our guide for the future. Allow me, as I conclude, to give a thought towards that future. If the Asian tigers were at the same level of development as Kenya in 1963, and I remind Kenyans that our country, our nation, actually lent South Korea money to implement its development plan in 1963. The question we therefore must ask ourselves is what happened? Why were we unable to develop as fast as those did? This future did not happen because we failed to plan for it. The future evaded us because we failed to imagine it. And I say so because imagination is more powerful than knowledge. For the past to have an impact on our future, we must constantly imagine and reimagine it. Indeed, as we envision the future, we are also reminded that in 8 years' time, our economic blueprint, that is the Kenya Vision 2030, will have run its course. By then, Kenya will be home to a projected 63 million citizens. And as Kenya turns 100 in the year 2063, we will be home to 100 million citizens. For us to secure the elusive shared prosperity and intergenerational equity, we must be bold in our imagination of Kenya at 100. But our imagination cannot follow the popular path. It must follow the bold path. And indeed, Vision 2063 must be a bold imagination of what Kenya will be at 100 years. The solemn duty of framing how this vision looks is the task of our generation. Indeed, as our children will walk through the Boulevard of Heroes in this park and play in the Pavilion of Reflection, what account of ourselves will we have left in this unedited place of history? It must be written in this unedited book of history that we chose the bold path over the popular path. Indeed, as it is said, the lion is not the strongest animal in the savannah, neither is it the biggest, neither is it the shrewdest, but it is the boldest, and that is why it is the king. Indeed, it is for this very same reason that it is said that an army of sheep led by a lion can defeat an army of lions led by a sheep. The future of Kenya, inspired by the past and present, must be about a brave imagination. That is why today I congratulate the young men and women of the 19th Battalion of the Kenya Rifles, to whom I have presented the presidential and regimental colors today. We must celebrate our defense forces because when they go to war in the defense of our borders, they know too well that they will either return hoisting our national flag or return wrapped in our national flag. This takes boldness and dedication. So, fellow Kenyans, as I now end my address, I want to remind of a promise I made on the 20th of October 2021, where I directed the Ministry of Energy to fast-track the implementation of the recommendations of the Presidential Task Force on Power Purchase Agreements. I am pleased to note that the pathway to reduce the cost of electricity by over 30% is on course. In honor of this pledge to the nation, and response to the concerns of the high cost of electricity raised both by individual customers and enterprises, I am pleased to announce to the nation that the reduction of the cost of electricity will be implemented in 2 tranches of 15% each, with the first 15% achieved through initial actions focusing on system and commercial losses, and this will be reflected in people's bills in December of this year. A further 15% reduction will happen in the first quarter of 2022. In realizing the second tranche of reduction in power bills, I note that the Ministry of Energy and other government departments have initiated engagement with independent power producers aimed at renegotiation of power purchase agreements so as to give our country better value for money for our consumers. I urge the power producers to demonstrate goodwill as we seek to make our energy sector a greater catalyst of our national development. So as we move to the new year 2022, I would wish to leave you with the words of our founding president as he wished our new republic a Merry Christmas 57 years ago. And in it he urged our good men and women to be of service to their fellow countrymen. And indeed his New Year message was, and I quote, "Let everyone who is educated teach others to read and write. Let every man who is healthy help a man who is sick. Let every man who has work find some prospect for a man that is poor and not employed. Let service be our inspiration for the future," end of quote. And with this message, I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a prosperous 2022. Asanteni sana wenzangu. Leo nimesema sitaongea mengi. Juzi nilipata nafasi kule bunge ya kutaja mambo mbalimbali ambayo serikali ambayo naiongoza tumeweza kuyatenda. Siku ya leo ni siku ya kukumbuka mashujaa, wale ambao walipigania uhuru wa taifa hili letu la Kenya, wale ambao wamepigania demokrasi ya taifa hili letu la Kenya. Na hapa ambapo tulipo ni pahali ambapo patasaidia sisi kama Wakenya kujikumbusha mema na mazuri ambayo tumeweza kuyatenda, yale mabaya ambayo tumepitia na ambayo tuwatakikana tusome ndio tusirudie, na pia yale maovu ambayo yametendeka ambaye lazima kama nchi tujikinge na tuhakikishe ya kwamba hatuwezi tena kurudi kwa umwagikaji wa damu. Ningependa nichukue fursa hii kushukuru wote ambao tumefanya kazi pamoja na wao katika huu mradi wa kujenga hii Uhuru Gardens. Nianze kwanza kwa kushukuru jeshi letu kupitia wewe CDF na wenzako. Jeshi limejikaza kabisa pamoja na wengine, na tujue ya kwamba hata ule mtu ambaye amechora na wale ambao wamekuwa ma-engineers wote ni wananchi na watoto wa jamhuri hii yetu ya Kenya, na tunawashukuru na tunasema ya kwamba mbele ya mwezi wa 4 mwaka ujao tutarudi hapa kufungua museum ambayo iko hapa na kufungua hii uwanja kikamili kwa wale wote, wananchi wote, watoto wa shule bila malipo waweze kutembea, wajionee historia yao, wajionee pahali ambapo wametoka, wajifunze kutoka babu zetu, na waweze kujua pahali ambapo wangependa kupeleka nchi hii. Ningefanya makosa kama singemshukuru mmoja kati yetu hapa ambaye tumekuwa tukiongea na yeye kutoka miezi karibu 14 wakati nilianza hii project ya Uhuru Gardens, ambaye tumetembea na yeye hapa sana na amenipatia mawaidha. Mheshimiwa Raila Odinga, nasema asante sana kwa yale ambayo umetusaidia kutenda. Naonekana hawa wazee wanataka uwaongeleshe, kuja uwasalimie jameni.